the question I would want to ask there is the way these cases or these incidents are portrayed in media or social media or by any people who have some influence has a huge part to play in how people perceive. So many times, violence, especially in relationships, is portrayed not from an angle of, oh, this is something that we need to be aware of or we need to do something about it, that we need policies or support systems or help or understanding. That's unfortunately not very common when these stories go viral. What happens is a sense of sensationalism and a sense of this is what you need to maybe just look at as something very, catchy and attention grabbing.
So, hello. Today we have with us a renowned psychologist, Himani Kulkarni, and we will be discussing psychological aspects of Raja Raghuvanshi case. The tragic death of Raja Raghuvanshi in Meghalaya during what was supposed to be a celebratory honeymoon has shocked the nation. And what initially appeared to be a romantic getaway turned into a meticulously planned murder orchestrated by his wife Sonam and her lover Raj Kushwaha. So, the chilling details of the crime, spanning multiple failed attempts and a cross country escape, it has raised profound questions about the pressures and the secrets that can lurk behind closed doors. So, in this conversation, we delve into the psychological and societal forces that may have led to this tragedy. So, Himani, my first question is so that there are speculations that the murder of Raja Raghuvanshi was allegedly carried out by more than just his wife, and police investigations are pointing towards involvement of more people, including Sonam's alleged lover. So why do people sometimes agree to do terrible things like hurting someone just because someone close to them asks? So what happens in a group that makes wrong decisions feel okay? What kind of person can convince others to go along with the violent plan? Is it manipulation, shared pain, or something else that makes people follow?
Thank you so much, Jagmeet, for the question. I think there's so many parts to it, your question itself, because one is you're saying, what is it that's making people commit these violent crimes? Second is, what is helping them convince others around them to commit it with them? So I think we have to take a step back and understand that this is not necessarily, especially with a case like this, with the limited information that we have about this so far, it's not, it can't be something that's happening simply because, oh, there was this hate or this desire to cause harm. I'm sure that might be a part of it, but that's not necessarily the entire situation. So where we are able to see something where people are convinced to cause harm for the people they love, there is obviously a part of it that could be manipulation, that could be the person convincing them through emotions or through a way of conveying of what they have experienced, or to make them experience some form of guilt or fear that they are instilling in the other person as well. But at the same time, there's also possibility and there's also understanding that sometimes people are experiencing this from a very different perspective or a very different lens than how we are seeing it as outsiders. What we call the tunnel vision, or what we call feeling so involved in that circumstance that you're not looking at the bigger picture of what your actions are leading up to. And this is not just for heinous crimes like murders or much, much bigger harm in that sense, but this also applies to our everyday actions sometimes. When we are experiencing intense emotions, we are unable to distinguish between what would be the right course of action or what is the logical next step. And we are much more guided by our sense of either survival or our sense of duty or our sense of responsibility for the relationships that we're talking about. So it's not for us to say it's right or wrong to experience that. Of course, murder cannot be justified, but everything before that, the experience that leads to that act, I think we have to build the understanding that people experience that in a way that feels very all consumed. And I think maybe what helps us understand that this is not a criminal versus a non-criminal scenario. It's the scenario in which if we are feeling so pushed for our survival, our actions will look illogical to the other person. I'm not saying that they were in the same circumstance, but I'm saying if we pull back a little bit and try and understand what can lead people to do these things, there is definitely that element of feeling so engrossed in your experience, so overwhelmed by your feelings that your capacity to be logical is taken away.
Right. So, Himani, on the same lens, my next question is that when stories about crime in relationships they go viral, so do they change the way people think, especially young couples? Do they see love and trust in a very different way when they are narrated in such events, or does it plant a quiet fear under the surface? So, is social media affecting young minds to become more violent or get feared by such events?
Sure, it would, right? Like it has to. And also, again, I would say maybe the question I would want to ask there is the way these cases or these incidents are portrayed in media or social media or by any people who have some influence has a huge part to play in how people perceive. So many times, violence, especially in relationships, is portrayed not from an angle of, oh, this is something that we need to be aware of, or we need to do something about it, that we need policies or support systems or help or understanding. That's unfortunately not very common when these stories go viral. What happens is a sense of sensationalism and a sense of this is what you need to maybe just look at as something very catchy and attention grab. So of course this has become almost unfortunately like a gender concern that people are looking at, like men versus women in relationships,
Hmm.
which unfortunately is a very myopic way of seeing something like this.
Right.
We have to understand that what goes into making someone a murderer are factors that shape them not just in that one incident, but over a long course of time. We don't know because, of course, this particular case is still unfolding. We don't know what has happened behind their stories and what has led to this. But in general, when people are in a space where they're murdering other people, it's not just the factor of how much they hate this other person. That's a very, very, very surface level understanding. It's also, in fact, how we portray it as, like you said, that impacts people so much because it's being portrayed a certain way.
Right.
When we hear other cases in the past also where people had said something like, say, um, cases around people who are living together without the say marker of marriage, then they sometimes become about religion and caste and factors beyond what that relationship was also about. So I
Right.
think it's, of course, they impact people, and I'm hearing people even in therapy as clients and otherwise among conversations with people that this is impacting them. But I don't think it's impacting them because of just the case itself. It's the portrayal that matters.
Exactly. So, like when we look back at cases like this, we often ask, what did everyone miss? Were there any signs that someone was breaking down or heading towards something dark? So, could family, friends, or even counselors, could they have seen something early on? And if they knew what to look for, and what exactly should we be looking for?
No, absolutely. I think there definitely would have been signs of one way or the other. But I think we look at those signs as we don't look at them as problems until it becomes a problem. had
Right.
had this person, I'm sure maybe at some point in this case or another, the person expresses some kind of discomfort or they are dissatisfied with the life they have. They express how they are unhappy with this marriage, or they are not looking forward to this life, or they show their discomfort in other ways. But all of that is seen as things that don't need any intervention. All of that is seen as things that are very, very okay because they're not still rocking the system. They're still not making other people uncomfortable enough. But when something like this happens, where something so severe happens, it is then that we take a step back and really look at what the problem might have been. Had this murder not happened, and again, we are only going off speculations here, but had this murder not happened and had he not lost his life, I don't think people would have thought or talked about even the fact that maybe they were unhappy in the marriage, or maybe one of them was unhappy, or maybe there was something happening throughout this that showed that the one or the both of those people were feeling intense emotions of some kind.
Right.
We see so many people in such marriages around us also, but nobody really wants to intervene because it's still not become a problem for the larger system.
Right. So, like in these, traditional family structures, especially ones that are shaped by patriarchy, so why do we still expect women to adjust and stay quiet or, keep the peace? And what kind of emotional toll does that take on them that they go to such extreme lengths?
Um, See, before I answer that, I really want to assert that it's not to say that the murder is okay. Of course, the murder has to be questioned and looked at from a very both social and legal point of view. But to answer your question, I think patriarchy is well and alive. It's the system that we live in for men and for women is very patriarchal in all ways. We expect women to have maybe more of like their independence or a bit of their career and some agency in terms of finances, perhaps some agency in terms of bit of agency in terms of their bodies, not a lot. But we still want to have very strong boundaries or very strong capping for what is allowed. We don't want them to really have the freedom to explore, especially in a system where, because patriarchy is a part of a larger system. Patriarchy plays in with caste, it with endogamy, with larger class structure. All of that plays together. A lot of times, what happens is that women have are controlled by not just their families but their communities, their larger structure, because that has been the norm for a long time. Hmm.
Right.
And a lot of times, what happens is that discomfort or that disruption may channel into something that is much more just violent.
Right. Thank you so much, Imani, for sharing your invaluable insights today. And we are looking forward to having you to join us again for more discussions in the near future and probably not on, these very inhumane topics that we discussed today. And for our viewers, if you have any questions or thoughts about today's conversations, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. And thank you once again and see you also.
Thank you so much, Apni. Thank you for having me.